We've reached chapter 24 of Genesis, and you can't help but have noticed just how long this chapter is. It's a whopper, isn't it? 67 verses. Not only is it a whopper, but if you read it during the week, you'll notice it sounds quite strange to us because of all the repetition involved. In fact, that's why we could start reading at verse 33, because from verse 33 onwards, Abraham's servant more or less recaps for us everything that's happened in the first 33 verses. So it's a long story, a detailed story, but it does make it, therefore, quite tricky to preach. So to navigate our way through it, we're going to use three numbers, all right? They're pretty straightforward numbers. 3, 4, 5. Couldn't get easier than that. So let's start with number 3. This chapter is about finding a wife for Isaac. It opens with Abraham sending his servant on an important mission. And it doesn't start off easy, this chapter, right? It appears back in the day, a handshake wouldn't suffice. So look at verse 2. Abraham said to his servant, the oldest of his household, who had charge of all that he had, "Put your hand under my thigh." What does that mean? Well, there's no diplomatic way of saying this, but Abraham's servant appears to cup Abraham's genitalia with his hand. All right. Now, this seems totally bizarre to us, particularly because we live in a highly sexualized culture. So people might raise a few eyebrows. What's that all about? But this was how people swore oaths in the ancient world. And what's the significance of the servant placing his hand in or around Abraham's genitals? Well, it's a picture. Abraham saying, I'm putting the future of my clan, my seed, as it were, into your hands. So he says, verse 2, "Put your hand under my thigh, that I may make you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and God of earth, that you will not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I dwell, but will go to my country and to my kindred and take a wife for my son Isaac." Abraham's servant becomes Abraham in this sense. Abraham is unable to leave, so he sends his faithful servant, his messenger, to do his will. So the number 3 then, there are 3 rules, 3 standards that the future wife of Isaac must meet. So rule number 1, she's got to be from the right family. Abraham has been promised by God that his family would conquer and one day inherit the land of Canaan. And they would do that through Abraham and through his descendant, through this boy Isaac. Well, by this time, Isaac's 40, he's roughly my age. And it appears Abraham has forbidden him to marry any of the Canaanite women round about him. The Canaanite people are pagan. They worship demons, fallen angels. These people spiritually, biblically, are in the line of the serpent, all right? They're not the children of promise. They've been completely given over to Satan. The blessed line is Abraham's family, his clan. So that's where he's got to send his servant. Go back to Mesopotamia, to the city of Nahor. Nahor was the name of Abraham's brother. So it could be this is Abraham's brother's city. He's established it. He's the king. He's the local warlord. Go there and get my son a princess from my clan. Now at this point, we've got to say this. Laban's family, Abraham's original family, his clan, are no more godly than the Canaanites. We saw that when we considered Abraham's background. His family in Syria were also pagan. They did not know Yahweh. Laban knows the name of Yahweh in verse 31 because the servant has told Rebekah and Rebekah has told him. But we know from chapter 31, later on we meet Laban again, and he's got a whole bunch of idols. And he calls Yahweh the God of your father. He's not my God. So Abraham, when he says go back to my clan, He's only concerned with DNA. And he's concerned with DNA because that's what God has told him to be concerned with. He trusts God's promise. It's your family line, your DNA, which will bless the other nations, not the Canaanites. So rule 1, you've got to find a woman from the right clan. Rule number 2, she's got to have the right attitude. She's got to be willing to go with you. This is an obvious rule, but it's worth mentioning. Abraham is not going to take a wife for Isaac through force, through slavery. Verse 8, look, he says, if the woman is not willing to follow you, then you will be free from the oath of mine. Only you must not take my son back there. It would have been relatively easy for Abraham's servant to kidnap a wife for Isaac or simply take a slave. He could pay the family off and take her whether she liked it or not. But Abraham wants his son's wife to be a willing participant. And also, again, it shows his faith in God's promise. He's confident that his servant will find a suitable match for Isaac. Third and final rule for this bride is that she's got to have the right character. Now, this rule was introduced by Abraham's servant. He makes an oath with Abraham and then he travels to Nahor. And when he reaches the well outside of the city, look what he says, verse 12. He said, O Lord God of my master Abraham, please grant me success today and show steadfast love to my master Abraham. Behold, I am standing by the spring of water, and the daughters of the men of the city are coming out to draw water. Let the young woman to whom I shall say, please let down your jar that I may drink, and who shall say, drink, and I will water your camels, let her be the one whom you have appointed for your servant Isaac. By this I shall know that you have shown steadfast love to my master. Now, it was customary for the young women in the tribe to pour water for the animals. So Abraham sets up a test. He's looking for a young lady who is servant-hearted. So picture it, right? Abraham's servant is exhausted. He's tired. He can't pull up water from this well himself. Will the young lady he talks to see his plight and have mercy on him? And if she sees that this guy's exhausted and he's at the end of his tether, he's not going to have time to satisfy the camels either. So will she offer to water the camels? The young lady who does that will not only show that she cares about people, she'll also show that she cares about all of God's creation. She even cares about the camels. And she's willing to go to great lengths to be hospitable. That's the kind of woman who will make a great wife for Isaac. Okay, 3 rules. Right family, right attitude, right character. Will any of the women of the city of Nahor fulfill those requirements? Well, we get the answer in this story, and a story that plays out in 4 different locations. That's our 4 different locations. So location number 1, scene 1, we've just been there, it's Abraham's tent, right? It could well be Abraham's deathbed scene. He's so old, he's so weak, he can no longer get around. So he gives his faithful servant a mission. Go and find Isaac a wife. Now, why doesn't he send Isaac on this mission himself? Well, commentators suggest it's because Isaac is a passive individual. He's the sort of guy who goes for long contemplative walks in the field rather than enjoys a good manly hunt somewhere. Ishmael, he's the strong, athletic type, isn't he? He's a fierce warrior. Isaac is the gentler, tamer, younger brother. And of course, when we think about Isaac's character, we're reminded of God's plan. We're reminded of the way God operates. See, God doesn't choose the obvious answer, does he? His promise is going to be fulfilled using the weaker, milder, seemingly lesser of the 2 sons. And I think that should encourage us as small church Christians, shouldn't it? I would imagine it's easy in a mega church in the United States to feel confident in the power of God's words. You've seen these churches, they've got an impressive band, they've got different teams taking care of the music and the social media and the catering. They've got 4 different pastors who can go and deal with different groups in the church. But of course, that's not our experience, is it? At the district prayer meeting on Wednesday, there were 15 of us, and I was the youngest. So from a human point of view, well, we're like Isaac. We're passive, we're quiet, we're small. Seemingly, in a worldly perspective, insignificant. But remember the way God operates. Remember what he tells us in 1 Corinthians 1. Paul says, God chose what is foolish in the world to shame the wise. God chose what is weak in the world to shame the strong. God chose what is low and despised in the world, even things that are not, to bring to nothing things that are, so that no human being might boast in the presence of God. No one looking at Isaac would think, oh, what a guy. But he was the man through which God would fulfill his promises. Okay, location number 1, we're with Abraham at the tent. Second location, outside the city of Nahor. Abraham's servant has arrived. He's tired. He's got a few men with him. He's come a long, long way. So ignore the pink line. I'm not even sure what that is. But he's come from Israel, the land of Canaan there, and he's gone all the way up to that bit where it says Haran. Nahor is next door to Haran. So he's gone a long way. He's got a few men with him, but they're worn out too. And so he said his prayer in verse 12 about the lady he's looking for. And no sooner have the words left his mouth, but who should walk out of the city? Well, verse 15, before he'd finished speaking, behold, Rebekah, who was born of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, the wife of Nahor, Abraham's brother, came out with her water jar on her shoulder. Now there's a quick answer to prayer if ever I saw one. But of course, the servant at this stage, he doesn't know who Rebekah is. All he does know, verse 16, is that she is very attractive. She's the right age, and perhaps from her clothes, he knows that she's an unmarried virgin. So verse 17, he approaches her. And remember, he's looking to see if she's got the right character. Is she going to pass his test? Is God going to answer his prayer? Well, a little bit of practical things, something practical to say here. It goes without saying that when a Christian is looking for a partner, character is more important than looks. Now, that's not to say that looks are of no importance. They must be of some value because the author Moses makes a point of mentioning them. Rebekah is not just pretty, she's very pretty. She's the best looking woman in town. So we mustn't underplay the role beauty plays when it comes to finding a marriage partner. Don't marry someone you can't stand the sight of. It'd be stupid. Now, I didn't know much about my wife when I first met her, but what I did know was that she was very pretty and I wanted to spend more time with her and get to know her better. However, and this, I've got to say this doesn't apply to my wife yet, right? But beauty fades, doesn't it? That's why character is more important than beauty. Because eventually gravity wins, time wins. At my old church, I used to visit an old married couple who've both since gone to be with the Lord. And the husband showed me once a photo of him and his wife when they were young. It was an old black and white photo from the 1960s. And they were a very handsome couple. He was tall and athletic. He had a bit of money, so he was well dressed in his smart suit. And his wife, who I only knew as an old lady, she was so good looking, she could have been a model. But of course, time had caught up with them. Age had taken its toll. But they were still attractive. Why? Well, there was a beauty about their godly character. Their love for Jesus, the way they wanted to serve the church, even in their old age. Their kindness, their concern for other members. So character is of utmost importance when choosing a good partner. And that's what Abraham's servant is looking for. Does he find it? Well, yes, look at verse 20. She quickly emptied her jar into the trough and ran again to the well to draw water, and she drew for all his camels. The man gazed at her in silence to learn whether the Lord had prospered his journey or not. Camels apparently can drink an awful lot of water. So to quench 10 camels' thirst is a big ask, and yet Rebecca is willing to do it. She's passed the first test. And as Abraham's servant watches, he's praying and hoping that this woman is the one. She's got the right character, but is she from the right family? Is she from the right clan? Well, verse 22, Abraham's servant rewards Rebecca for her hard work. And he rewards her generously. He gives her a solid gold ring and 2 solid gold bracelets. Verse 23, and he said, "Please tell me whose daughter you are. Is there room in your father's house for us to spend the night?" She said to him, "I am the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, whom she bore to Nahor." Or in other words, I'm Abraham's niece, I'm Isaac's cousin. And with those words, the servant knows she's fulfilled the second rule. Will the third rule be met? Well, we find out in the third scene, all right? We're on 4 locations. Third location, dinner at the palace or dinner at the house. If it is Nahor, Abraham's brother, who's established this city, then his house would have been the biggest, the most lavish. This would have been a palace, so to speak. He would have been the warlord, the chief. Nahor's probably long since dead, but Bethuel, his son, is now the king. Laban is his son. He's now the prince, if you like, of the whole city. And Laban is not a particularly pleasant character. He's a greedy individual. We know that from later as well. When he sees the wonderful gifts the servant has given Rebecca, he salivates. And he invites the servant and all of Abraham's men back to his family home for a feast. So, scene 3, we're gathered in Bethuel's beautiful home. Imagine there's a fire burning, there are servants pouring wine. You can smell the meat cooking on the oven. And there's Laban and Bethuel, father and son, and of course they're probably showing off their house. Look at the lovely mantelpiece, look at the paintings, look at some of the tapestries and all that. And they're thinking, well, this guy is rich, this servant, whoever he is. We can do some deals with him. We've got flocks, we've got things we can trade, and he's got a lot of gold on him. So we're going to have a nice business dinner, and we'll sit down over some cigars and we'll do some deals. But before the servant will touch the food, he wants to tell them the truth in verse 33. And so he tells them everything, as Bob read, everything that's taken place up until then. He even tells him the 3 tests Rebecca needs to pass. Well, she's passed 2 of them. The question is, does she pass the crucial test? Is she willing to go with the servant and become Isaac's wife? Is Bethuel willing to give his blessing to Rebecca marrying Isaac? Verse 50, then Laban and Bethuel answered and said, "The thing has come from the Lord. We cannot speak to you bad or good. Behold, Rebecca is before you. Take her and go and let her be the wife of your master's son, as the Lord has spoken." Laban and Bethuel seem quite happy to accept the servant's offer. They in essence say, well, it is what it is. We can't condemn it. We don't know who your God is. We don't know if it's good or bad. But if your God has said this, well, so be it. We want an easy life, so she's got to marry someone, take Rebecca and go. Verse 52, when Abraham's servant heard their words, he bowed himself to the earth before the Lord. The servant praises God because he clearly sees that God has directed his paths all the way. Verse 53, and the servant brought out jewellery of silver and of gold and garments and gave them to Rebekah. He also gave to her brother and to her mother costly ornaments. Abraham's servant pays the dowry for Rebekah: silver, gold, costly ornaments, fine clothes. This is a thank you to her family for releasing her. Rebekah has to be honoured, so a gift has to be made. And it's a very generous gift. It's an over-generous payment. Verse 54, and he and the men who were with him ate and drank, and they spent the night there. Now, the following morning, it seems like Laban and his mother come up with a little plan, a little scheme. This servant likes to splash the cash. Uncle Abraham, he's a rich guy. He's got a bit of dough. And he pays over the odds, this servant. He pays over the odds for camels. He pays over the odds for brides. So if we entertain him a little bit longer, we'll be in for a windfall. So they ask him, stay with us. She can't go yet. Give her 10 more days. It's like when casinos in Las Vegas give high rollers free hotel rooms. They want to keep them there as long as possible so that they continue to spend money. But Abraham's servant has had enough. He's got the right girl from the right family with the right character. Is she willing to leave there and then with him? Will she step out in faith? Verse 57, they said, let us call the young woman and ask her. And they called Rebekah and said to her, will you go with this man? She said, I will go. So they sent away Rebekah, their sister, and her nurse, and Abraham's servant, and his men. And they blessed Rebekah and said to her, our sister, may you become thousands of 10,000s, and may your offspring possess the gate of those who hate him. 3 rules kept, 3 locations down. What's the 4th? Well, we end our story in Isaac's neighbourhood, Isaac's backyard. Abraham's servant and Rebekah have now made the long trip back down to the land of Canaan. And where do they find the groom? Well, we're told he's out meditating in the field. Now, what does it mean to meditate? Is he there sitting with his legs crossed, humming, trying to clear his mind? Well, no. Isaac is praying, definitely, but there's slightly more to it than simply just praying. The original Hebrew, Isaac is lamenting or complaining to God. He's pouring out his soul, pouring out his heart in sorrow. But why is he so upset? Well, he's still mourning the loss of his mother Sarah. Her death has left a horrible void in his life. And so he's lamenting, he's complaining to God. And perhaps he's complaining because God's still not yet supplied him with a wife. And so he's out walking alone, talking to God. Well, in this chapter, we've seen a prayer instantly answered, haven't we? When Rebekah ran out of the city. But now we see a prayer eventually answered. For years, for decades, Isaac has wanted a partner. And finally, God answers his prayer. The servant delivers Rebekah right to his feet. She vows herself, as was the custom, and Isaac accepts her as his wife. Now, in ancient times, there was no need for a lavish ceremony, no speeches, no cakes. We simply go straight to the honeymoon. He takes her into his family tent and the marriage is consummated. And what a lovely ending to the story. We're told Isaac loved her. And this new relationship helps heal the wound left by the death of his mother. He is comforted by his wife. Okay, 3 rules, 4 locations. To close, 5 analogies, 5 similarities. This is the second major account of a marriage in Genesis. The first major marriage account is that of Adam and Eve. Eve is made to provide Adam with help. She is to be his companion as he subdues the earth. Eve is created by God from Adam's side so that she can be his helpmeet. And so we see echoes of that picture here in Genesis 24. Rebekah's arrival comforts a distraught, grieving Isaac. She's delivered right to his side. In fact, I only noticed this just now. Isaac is in the field. Adam was made to grow stuff from the field, wasn't he? That's where he finds her. She's delivered to his side in the field. He is a new Adam, and he loves her. Remember, when Adam first sees Eve, he bursts into song. He's head over heels in love with her. He's besotted with her. So Eve and Rebekah are closely linked. It's to Eve that the promise of a serpent crusher is indirectly made. And so here in Genesis 24, we've got a new Eve, a new hope. She's going to be the woman who carries on the godly line. And where is that godly line going to end? Well, it's going to end with the man, Jesus Christ, the seed of Abraham. In fact, Jesus is going to be the new Adam, the better Adam. And the new Adam is going to take a new Eve. So these two marriage accounts in Genesis are a shadow of the most important marriage in history. That is the marriage between Jesus and his bride, the church, us. So listen to the language Paul uses in 2 Corinthians 11. 2 Corinthians 11:2, he says, "For I feel a divine jealousy for you, since I betrothed you to one husband to present you as a pure virgin to Christ. But I'm afraid that as the serpent deceived Eve by his cunning, your thoughts will be led astray from a sincere and pure devotion to Christ." We here, the gathered church, are Jesus' bride. And like Rebekah, God has gone to great lengths to make us his brides. So 5 pictures, 5 analogies to close out with. 5 pictures that we can take from this passage in Genesis 24 to encourage us and to praise God with. First, and they all begin with D, first analogy is desire. Abraham desired a wife for Isaac. Isaac desired a wife for himself. But why? Well, it was to fulfill God's promise. Through your seed, he tells Abraham, all of the world's nations will be blessed. But think about it. Why does God make that promise to Abraham in the first place? Why does God want human beings to be blessed? Well, it's because God desires to re-establish a relationship with human beings. Why did he promise Eve a serpent crusher? Well, it's because God is determined to undo the damage caused by the serpent. God is heartbroken when Adam and Eve reject him. These are his children, his offspring. And he promises that he will bring humanity back into his loving arms. So look, if you're not a Christian here this evening, if you're not joined to God's bride, the church, know that God desires you. He longs to have you back in his family. He wants a relationship with you. Second D is distance. God is willing to travel a great distance to win his bride. Abraham's servant travels about 460 miles to go and find Rebekah. And of course, that's before trains, planes, and automobiles. This is a journey that would have taken weeks. If you've ever sat on a horse or been on a donkey ride, you know, it ain't comfortable after 5 minutes. That 460 miles of that. But of course, God goes further, doesn't he? So this thing we've got to understand about God. At one time, God was distinctly separate from his creation. But because of his love for us, he changed his relationship with his creation. God has permanently embedded himself in the fabric of our universe. He's made himself a part of our reality. He became flesh. He left the splendour and the majesty of the spiritual realm, and he became a man. Abraham's son Isaac, remember, he was first spared from death in chapter 22. God provided a ram. But now he's spared from this treacherous journey. Abraham says, I'm not going to send Isaac, he's too precious, I'm going to send my servant. But of course God goes further, doesn't he? God won't spare his own son. His own son is the servant. The man Jesus, born of a woman. That's the distance God has gone to win you and me for himself. And it didn't take weeks or even months. Jesus lived as a man in the flesh for 30 plus years. And now God has permanently altered his state for his bride. God, part of the Godhead, is now a human being, Jesus. And that's staggering, isn't it, Christian friend? I can't get my head around it. I can't understand it. Don't think that when God became a man, he put on a man suit for half an hour, like you might put on a Halloween costume. You wouldn't put on a Halloween costume. I just heard that in my own head. But it's not a fancy dress costume. The God who cannot change changed himself for us. He made him a little lower than the angels. That is the distance God goes for his brides. Third D is debit. What did it cost to pay the bride price, the dowry, for Rebecca? What appeared in the debit column of Abraham's annual accounts? Well, cost of Rebecca, wasn't it? Was silver, gold, fine clothes, some beautiful family heirlooms. There's a bride who must be paid for. Well, at what cost did God buy his church? Well, God goes further than Abraham. It cost him everything. It cost Jesus his life. And not just his life, his dignity. As he took on the sin and the filth of the bride he would save. Jesus pinned naked to a cross, hanging in agony. Rejected by his Father and despised by his own people. Remember, he was so wounded that people would say, well, no one has ever been marred like this man. The God who cannot die dies on a cross to pay for his brides. Fourth D, and I had to play around with this one a little bit, drop dead gorgeous, all right? Now, most people in life have some beauty, don't they? Most people are average looking. So with the right haircut and a bit of makeup, I can stand to look at you, all right? But occasionally you will meet someone who's been so blessed by God as far as looks are concerned, they take your breath away. They're drop dead gorgeous. So good looking, your heart stops beating. Well, Rebecca was that attractive. And there's something about beauty, isn't there, that cheers you up. I met a woman once. She was so attractive, it was just a pleasure to be in her presence. It wasn't a sexual thing. It was just, she was beautiful. She lit up the room. It was a joy to be near her. It was a joy to see the beauty that God created. And people do weird things around beauty, don't they? My sister-in-law, Hannah, is blessed with looks. And when she lived in London, she told me she didn't have to buy coffee. The baristas just gave it to her. Just, oh, it's a free one for you, love. Because of the way she looked. Well, look, here's the amazing thing about Jesus' bride. Jesus' bride, the church, is full of broken, sinful human beings. And it doesn't matter if on the outside you're a supermodel who looks like Michelle Pfeiffer or you're free bag ugly and missing a load of teeth. God doesn't look at the outsides. He looks at the heart. And what he sees in the human heart is an ugly, warped, twisted being that's capable of all types of evil. None of us deserve free coffee, do we? But of course, God goes further. He takes that ruined sinner and he clothes them in righteousness. Our sin, our stain is removed and we're made perfect in his sight. When God looks at his bride, the church, he is thrilled with what he sees. He loves being in our presence because Jesus has given us a complete makeover. We're now full of his righteousness. The beauty of the Son has become the beauty of the church. In God's sight, we are drop dead gorgeous, and he cannot wait to meet us. Which brings us to the final D. Delightful. There's a magical ending to the Rebecca and Isaac wedding, isn't there? It's a delightful ending. You almost wish you could leave this couple here, cuddling in the field, looking lovingly into one another's eyes as the sun sets. But of course, we know as we continue through Genesis, Isaac and Rebecca are going to screw up like all human beings. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to have favourite sons. There's going to be division. Rebecca's going to become a scheming, interfering mother. Isaac, just like Abraham before him, is going to get old and weary. And death is going to tear this love story apart. But there is a reunion coming where bride and groom will never be parted. Where the love's never going to peter out. Where old age and death are never going to get in the way. Our marriage as a church to Jesus has a delightful end, doesn't it? It's the only happy ending that history will offer. Because one day Jesus will return to claim his brides. He will re-enter history and be unified with us forevermore. We'll close with Revelation 19:6. Then I heard what seemed to be the voice of a great multitude crying out, "Hallelujah! For the Lord our God, the Almighty reigns. Let us rejoice and exult and give him the glory. For the marriage of the Lamb has come, and the bride has made herself ready. It was granted her to clothe herself with fine linen, bright and pure. For the fine linen is the righteous deeds of the saints." And the angel said to me, "Write this. Blessed are those who are invited to the marriage supper of the Lamb."